Hello everybody, Teldo here, and today I'm going to be talking about the upcoming new game mode, which is called Stronghold. There was a beta test a few days ago, and you could play it all day long, which I did, and I had a lot of fun with it. The concept is really amazing of the game mode. Unfortunately, it still has a lot of problems and balancing issues, and it lacks a little bit of depth in some ways, but that's primarily due to some balancing issues. But today I'm going to be touching on all of that, and I'm going to explain how I feel about this game mode and what I think could be done better about it. But first of all, let's actually explain the basics of the game mode. As you can see on the minimap, there is an offensive lane and a defensive lane for each team. You can see a blue arrow showing all the way on one lane to the enemy guild lord, and the goal of the game pretty much is to kill the enemy guild lord. The guild lord is protected by two gates in between. You cannot see them on the minimap, unfortunately, and in order to destroy those gates you have to summon NPCs. You can't deal any damage on your own to those gates. If you want to summon those NPCs, you need to go to the middle of the map, which has a little barrel on it, and there are two little supply camps, and you can channel there, pick up some supplies. You can gain up to 2 stacks, and with those stacks you can run back to the start of your offensive lane, and you can summon either archers or door breakers there. Door breakers are supposed to deal a lot of damage to the gates, and archers are supposed to deal a lot of damage to NPCs and guards and just support in the general fight, I think. Unfortunately, they're a little weak, and I'm going to touch on that a little bit later as well. Also, there are 2 trebuchets, each for one for each team, and they can be used defensively quite well because NPCs can't really dodge the trebuchet, and they can also be used to interrupt some team fights, which is pretty good. And you can also see those little fist icons on the minimap, and those icons basically just represent timed events that happen every now and then. It either spawns at the top or at the bottom at some point, and you fight for it. It's basically just like a Temple of the Storm buff that spawns. You have to channel on it, and after you cap it, you summon a hero on your lane, and that hero has a lot of health, pushes up the lane, doesn't really fight against the enemies, and he has an area around him which gives all allies 50% damage reduction, which is really significant. Also, a little thing that I want to mention real quick: both channeling supplies and the buff for the hero, they don't get interrupted by damage like on other maps. You have to actually CC people, which is really interesting, and I'm gonna be talking about that later a little bit more. But those are pretty much the basics. You have to kill the enemy guild lord, and if you kill him, you win the game. There's also a point system. If there's a timeout, and the team with the most points wins at that point. But I'm gonna be talking about that later a little bit more as well. Before I start talking about the things that I think need improvements, I think I'm going to touch on the things that seem really interesting to me. I really like, for example, that you don't get interrupted by taking damage when you channel on the supply and when you channel on the hero buffs, because if you would get interrupted there, I think I've seen a lot of matches on Temple where people basically just had a crazy stalemate going on, where there was maybe like an engineer sitting on range with grenades on just crazy range, and he just threw those grenades onto the buff over and over again, and people couldn't really cap it. And I think it's cool that you can just cap it through taking damage, and you have to actually see the enemy. It has some a few small problems as well. I don't know if you consider it a problem, but people with Rampage, for example, or some stability can just cap through it, and it's going to be hard to actually interrupt them. Thankfully, to the new stability system, you can still maybe penetrate all those stabilities somehow, but it's going to be difficult. But I think overall it's definitely more interesting in this kind of game mode to have it in a way that you need CC to interrupt it. And I think it's also very interesting if you have like a small 1v1 going on in the middle for the supplies, and you have to send someone who has some CCs, and then maybe someone can sneak in like a quick cap during the 1v1. I think that would be really interesting if there would be a constant fight between 2 supply runners going on there. But unfortunately, I had to realize after playing this game mode for a day that my playstyle changed drastically, and that the game mode actually favors offensive play over defensive play, and I didn't find myself really playing for supplies at all anymore, and I basically almost never really defended unless I had no other choice, because I think defending in this game mode doesn't really gain much for you. Like, what benefit do you gain from defending? You might get a few kills, but you won't have enough time to actually benefit off of those kills. If you compare this to Conquest and you get a kill, you will outnumber the rest of the team for a while, and you can go for other nodes during that time, but you don't have enough time to like go and grab supplies and summon some creatures and wait for them to run over to their gate, and like, people will have a lot of time to respawn and react to that, even if you do get some kills. So kills are a lot less important on that game mode, and I don't really see what defending gets you. Like, there's no benefit to it, and I think if you just end up defending all the time, the enemy team will always deal a little bit of damage to your gate at least, and they will eventually be able to push through. The only thing that defending actually gives is points. Like, if you kill enemy players, you gain points, but at the same time, the enemies might get some damage on your gate, and that also gains you points. But yeah, you could technically try to just defend with 5 people and try to go for the point game and wait for the timeout. But I don't think that's something that Arena should really aim for. I think that would be incredibly boring if that would actually be a viable strategy. I'm not a big fan of the whole point system and the timeout anyway. I think it's just a very anticlimactic ending, and it's not very fun. But I think that's a problem. I think the map is heavily favored for offensive play, and it's just not rewarding enough to play defensively. And there's a few things that really amplify this. Like, guards, for example, don't really take a lot of damage. Like, they die really fast, and they're the best thing against enemy pushing NPCs. Like, they can actually one-shot enemy NPCs, and otherwise the NPCs are pretty tanky, actually. It's not that easy to kill them before they deal damage, especially if the enemy team uses stealth and heals on them while they're running through. So I think the offensive team will always have an advantage, and teams will actually, like, the games will actually end up being base races more than not. Like, there will be a lot of base races, and it really reminds me of something like Alterac Valley, which developed in the same way in World of Warcraft. That battleground also requires you to kill the enemy boss to win the game, and people just ran past each other in the middle. Like, 40 people ran past the other 40 people in the middle. They looked at each other, but they just kept running, and they killed the enemy boss to win the game. And that's basically how things developed in Alterac Valley. After a while, people started defending a little bit. They sent maybe 10 people to defend and try to slow down the enemy players, but in the end it was most of the time still a base race. And I think this game mode will suffer the same from the same problems, that people will actually just base race most of the time, because defending doesn't really reward you enough. And I don't know, maybe it's a problem that there's an offensive lane and a defensive lane, and you can't really push on both lanes. If you could push on both lanes, maybe there would be more interesting rotations going on. Maybe, like, you could try to pressure both lanes. Maybe you could have a quick rotation from one lane to the other lane and just push through with it. I just don't think this game mode offers enough for people to actually just rotate around and have some tactical play right now. Like, there isn't too much stuff I see happening. I think it would be really interesting if there was actually a split where 2 people offensively try to take down the enemy base and 2 people defend, and then there's like one guy just continuously running for the supplies. And then it would be cool if there would actually be a quick rotation where, like, people train up in a team fight in the middle and everybody just tries to grab supplies real quick, and then they just spawn all the NPCs together and try to go for a big push. But right now it doesn't really seem like that's happening at all. In all the matches that I played, it just ended up being those base races over and over again, and it's just not too interesting, I have to say. I really like the concept of everything, though. Like, I think it's especially fun because there's so many NPCs. I think that this game mode really favors utility over just crazy DPS, and I think that's awesome. Like for example, bunker guardians and maybe staff allies, they're not really being used that much anymore, or at all, really. Same with my engineer bomb build. It has so much utility. Those builds have so much utility and can do so many interesting things, but they don't offer that much damage. And I think it's just cool that you can actually do a lot with that utility in this game mode, because you can stealth your own guards, which just prevents enemies from dealing too much damage to them, and helps you to just push through. And you can also heal your guards, or you could stack might on your guards in the base, which makes them deal a lot more damage for the defense. There's so much stuff you can do, and I think it's really cool. Also, like a little thing that I noticed, I could leave my healing turret behind on my own guild lord, because the guild lord doesn't regenerate health on his own, so I could just try to heal him with that. Or I can use my elixir R to rest the guild lord when he goes into down state. That's actually really fun. I like that they chose to give the guild lord a down state before he just dies, because people would just end up running in with 5 people and rushing down the guild lord without enemies being able to defend it. That's like a problem, because again, there is not enough healing, and defending it is always like hard if people just try to rush in with insane DPS. So the downstate definitely helps with that. I feel like I could talk forever about this game mode, because there are so many things to consider and think about. And I think this game mode has a really amazing concept, and I would hate to see it not being as fun as it could be, just because of a few small design decisions that might have not been the right ones, or some imbalance within the game mode. So I would absolutely like to encourage you guys to just discuss down below in the comment section, and leave some ideas and some feedback for the game mode, so we can maybe come up with some improvements, and maybe ArenaNet will listen, and the game mode will end up being a lot more fun with that feedback. My vision personally would be that the game mode ends in a state where the teams are a little bit more split up, and where you have interesting rotations happening. Right now it's just as 5 people stacking most of the time, maybe 4 people stacking, and I don't think that's too fun. Maybe the game mode needs some kind of progression, like something like an early game, a mid game, and a late game, something that makes the game mode just evolve a little bit more throughout, you know? Maybe this game, I'm pretty certain that this game mode needs some kind of mechanic to just finish it faster. They already have a little bit of that going on by spawning the hero buffs, like twice the hero buffs at the end of the game, but I don't think that's enough. I think they need something to just finish off the game, because I had a few games that ended with the 15-minute mark, and that's not really fun either. And especially if they make the defense a little bit more rewarding and a little bit better, like maybe if they give the guards the ability to respawn, or if you allow people to spawn archers on the defensive lane instead of offensive lane, or something like that. If they would do that, then that would make the games last longer, and that's something that they probably don't want. So I think a mixture of that with the mechanic that the game ends faster, like maybe getting stronger minions with time or something like that, I think that could be a good start. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and please leave feedback in the section down below. I will also be looking at those comments in the upcoming days, and I will discuss with you guys together. And yeah, see you next week. Bye bye.